Okay, so to Gemara. So on Tuesday, which is the day that we learned Daf Valid, we learned about a woman who was mafresh. She was Makabel Nazirs, and then she was mafresh Karbanis, and then the husband was made for her. So we had a discussion of whether or not the husband is meshubit to bring the Karbanis of his wife. We have a Chlor Yehuda and the Chachamim, but no matter how you held, the Gemara really ended up saying that even if he's meshubit to pay for her Karbanis, that's Karbanis that she needs. But Karbanis that she doesn't need, such as a Nazirus that he's made for, so she doesn't need those Karbanis. Or the Torah speaks out if she is makabel upon herself her own Nedovas, and it's not Karbanis of Chiyuv. Thank you so much. Such as the Karbanis of a Tzoras, or the Karbanis of a Zova, or the Karbanis of a Yelodes. If it's not one of those, then the husband might not be Chiyuv. Then the Gemara asks the question: is how do a woman have her own money, her own animals to have Karbanis? So Divi asked, why can't we say that he gave it to her? Because if he gives her, she's claiming it, like giving her a gift. Nevertheless, the Gemara only seems to find cases where someone else gave her money, almanas she'ein lebayla reshusba, and I wasn't sure why. I wasn't sure how to answer Divi's question. It's a very good question. So the only thing I was able to fetch up was Toshva says that if he gave her Karbanis specifically for this Nazirus, then that's a kiyum. He wouldn't be able to be made for. But why can't it be speaking where he gave her animals for her to have, and she used those? And then he probably could, but maybe the Gemara wants to fix something that's more likely. But the kasha is better than teretz. Even with Avir there, if it's your machkal, I couldn't come up with an answer. Don't say that loud, please.
Yosy, so do you mind just changing the microphone? It's set right now. We're hearing you through the
thank you.
Camera mic.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Oh, it's much better. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so Zok Tehela Gemara. Oh, I forgot my pointer. I don't know what that is. Okay, so Zok Tehela Gemara. We are up to now the top of Chafei. So it's actually the bottom line of Chavdal Beis. Hayullah Mois Susumin Yipul Lunedova. So I just read it wrong. I said Hayullah, which would sound like we're referring to the Mishnah, but in fact the Gemara says Hayuloi Mois Susumin Yipul Lunedova, which is going back on the case where someone became a Nazir, was mafresh karbanos, and mace v'hayuloi mo'isasumin. If a man died and he had mo'isasumin, it's yiplu l'dava. So let's think what we have over here. We have money that's designated to fulfill the karbanos of his naziris. So they have to be they're going to be all three. There'll be a chatos, there'll be a shlomim, and there'll be an oila. So the halacha is, even though there's supposed to be a little bit of each of these things in his, naziris, in these karbanis, it all goes to the dove, it all becomes an oila. Frank the Gemara, how could you allow that? Valoi the mechatos murovin ben. Isn't one of the karbanos of his nazir a chatos? And if one of the karbanos nazir a chatos, how could he treat them all like an oilas nedava? A person was makabel upon himself naziris, and then he said, "Elu mois elu l'naziroisai." This money is going to be for my naziris. In other words, to pay for the karbanos of my naziris. Or we'll soon say, look, we'll see it. We'll actually see he released the karbanos nazirois. So these are for the karbanos of my naziris. No, I apologize. I take that back. He didn't say the karbanos nazirusai. He said l'nazirusai. These are for my naziris. So let me think. No, I take that back again. He said the karbanos nazirusai because The Toshis tells us if he said plain Nazirus, it's going to come out a little later, then it means they should be from our Nazirus, but not necessarily is this going to be the only money that's from our Nazirus. So in such a case, I can the Brasha says they could all go to Shlomim. But if I said lekarbanos Nazirusai, that means I want this money to be paying for all the 3 karbanos of my Nazirus. But I haven't yet identified which money goes for each carbon. So it's a mish, right? So some of this money is supposed to be a chatas, some of this money is supposed to be a shlomim, and some of this money is supposed to be an oila. Yet the halacha is that you leave it all the oilas ketzah is bayah. So the question is, how could you possibly say that? You can also ask the same kasha about shlomim muravim behen, right? But the Gemara says that we like asking. The Gemara is more to free. That's the kasha. Because shlomim is least could still be a carbon. Chatas, once he dies, because the case was that he died, right? Once he dies, it's from the chatayis hamesos. It's called mischaper baila or mesu baila. So it's a better kasha from the demei chatas, which is not royu to be brought at all. I'm sorry. Right. Oh. Rabbi Yochanan says a massive chiddush. Halacha he ben Nazir. Pashtus, it means it's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai by Nazir that when you have a gemishachs of money, it goes l'nedava. It's equal to l'nedava. So there's a very, very interesting meshach chachma on this sugya. It's not very interesting. It's off the charts. It's off the charts. Whenever someone brings a set of birds, he'll bring echad la'oila v'echad l'chatos. Say, for instance, a carbon oila v'yorid, right? So you bring a set of birds, echad la'oila v'echad l'chatos. If you are a richer person and you're bringing a behema, you only bring a chatos. Like oila v'yorid, either you bring a chatos if you're rich, and if you're poor, then you bring a pair of birds, echad la'oila v'echad l'chatos. So the question you really have to ask is, why do you need to bring the oil for? Just bring the chatos. That's what really he's mechuyev. That a good question? Why is there no oil? So the Even Ezra, we have to ask Mintzberg about this. The Even Ezra says that the reason why you have to bring an oil is beautiful. It's because normally in a chatos, the meat of the carbon, some of the meat of the carbon, some of the emurim, you're makar on the mizbeach. But a chatos ha'oif, you're not makar of anything on the mizbeach. All you do is you squeeze the blood out onto the mizbeach, and the basar ha'oif goes to the kohen. So therefore, the mizbeach kiviyachal is missing its fair share. So you have to bring in the oilas ha'oif so that you could satisfy the mizbeach's share of the chatos. So you're not really bringing an oila. You just need to give a share of the carbon to the mizbeach, so that's what you're bringing oila. That's what the Even Ezra says. So based on this, the Meshech Chochmah has a murder Einfall. There's a Gemara in Chulun Daf Chav Beis that asks as follows. You might think that you could bring an oilus ha'oif by night. You might think that you could be makar of the carbon or oilus ha'oif at night. Kamash malon, you could only bring it by day. He brings it right from a pasuk. Frek the Rashba, no karbonis could you be makar at night. So why would I think that an oil is just separate the limud to teach us that you can't be makar an oil oif at night? You can't be makar there's already a limud that says karbonis you can't bring at night. You could be makar the emurim, right? The first Mishnah in the Shah says hekter chalavim ve'emurim are mutarim kol halayla, but the hakravas hakarbon could only be by day. Why do I need a special pasuk that the oil oif should be by day? So this is a kasha that the Rashba asks on the Gemara in Chulin. It doesn't make sense that you should need a special pasuk to tell us you cannot be makriv and the oilus ha'oif by night. It doesn't make sense to need a special pasuk for that. It should be nichal on all the other karbanos. And no, but the question is, why can't you make the malika at night? Why can't you make the zrika at night? Why do I need a pasuk for that? Right? The akrava could be by night. Everyone's money that akrava could be by night. But what about the shchita or the malika by a bird? Why do you need a pasuk? Why should it be different than any other carbon? And the Rashba says, the Rashba is kadin asfa. Could be the Gemara doesn't really mean that you need a special pasuk. That's a huge chiddush. One day the Meshech Chochmah was sitting in his study. Goes back about 100 years ago, right? This goes back about the 1920s. And he was visited by one of the Rabbanim of Dvinks. It wasn't the Ragachev. I forgot what the name of this Rav was. It was a Choshev. Could be his name was Rav Nachum Ginsburg. Could be his name was Rav Nachum Ginsburg, who was also a Rav in the city of Dvinsk. And he came in to visit the Meshech Chochmah, and the Meshech Chochmah was beaming with simcha. So he asked the Meshech Chochmah, "What are you so happy about?" He says, "I got the biggest compliment of my life today." What happened? I fell asleep, and I was in Olam Haba, so to speak, and I heard them tumbling, "Heint in the Welt, in the dog kind of can learn." And the Raj says, and the Raj with Mitemis, so da Talmud Chacham in Dvinks was can good learning. That's what the Meshech Chochmah said over. He had such a dream. So Avad, the Raj probably meant because I found for the kasha. Because what did the Meshech? Oh, I forgot to tell you what the Meshech Chochmah said. I missed the whole punchline. Zok the Meshech Chochmah. You know why you need a special pasuk to tell you that in the Oilas Ha'oif you can't be makriv by night? It's referring to the Oilas Ha'oif that you bring together with the Chatos and the Oil of Yored. Since Be'etim there's no chapar on the Oil of Yored. The oil we decided, the Rebbe Nazir says, you only need the oil only because the Mizbech needs its chelak. But you don't really need a carbon oil. It's partially just to give the Mizbech some meat. If that's the whole purpose of the carbon, we know that Hektar Chalav and Beimurim is at night. So since we know Chalak and Beimurim is at night, and the only reason why you're bringing this particular carbon oil is only for the Hektar Chalav and Beimurim, maybe it should be allowed at night. That's why you need a special pasuk to tell you that it can't happen at night. So I mamish put the cart before the horse. So that's mamish a beautiful shot to explain why you need a special pasuk for the oilers oif, of a carbon oil of a yored. You need a pasuk to tell you can't bring it at night, because the whole purpose of that carbon is only for the Hektar Chalav and Beimurim. It's not for any other reason. So there you have a having to think that you can maybe do it by night, like all Hektar Chalav and Beimurim. Kamash Malon that even this oilers oif you can't do at night. So the Meshech Chochmah said that on that the Rashi says that Adrian Dvinsk can learn. He must have meant that because I'm answering his kasha that he had on the Gemara Chulin. That was the ma'aseh for the Meshech Chochmah. It's a Mori the Kamaisa. I never had a dream that anybody ever said that anything can learn. But he had a dream. It's an unbelievable story. If I told my wife, Yosy, you're dreaming, right? Okay, Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. So that's the story about the other side. It's halacha by Nazir that when there's a mixture, and we're going to soon see it's only if there's a mixture and there's a mix of chatos involved, only then do we say all of the money goes. It's not a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. In fact, it's a pasuk. It says in the pasuk l'chol nadreim u'l'chol nadvaisam. And let's look at this pasuk. This pasuk is not really referring to Naziris. It's a very general carbon. It says daber el aharon v'albona v'alkol b'nei Yisrael v'amart aleim ish b'beis Yisrael munager b'Yisrael asher yakrav karbonoi l'chol nadreim u'l'chol nadvaisam asher yikruv l'Hashem lo'ila. Doesn't say anything about Naziris here. But Shlokish is learning. It teaches you that Moshe Nazir Yehilu Nadava. How in the world do you see any shaykhs from this pasuk to Naziris? Zokt the Dok Toisvis, and I'm looking at the Toisvis in the intermediate lines. Or Shimon ben Lakish Armin l'chol Nazreim l'chol Nadvaisam Matayr Amar Mut Moshe Nadava. L'chol Karbonos Nazir ben Neder Heimboim. When it says l'chol Nadvaisam, it's referring to in the sheet of the Mekubetz adds that when you say l'chol Nadvaisam, it's referring to some type of umbrella that's machayiv you a whole cocktail, a whole package of karbonos, and the whole karbonos Nazir ben Neder Heimboim. The three karbonos that a Nazir brings, even the chatos, comes to the Neder, which means his kabbalas Naziris. Aydesha Nadar ben Nazir. Vafilu achatos is considered part of the chol nedroisam, the chol nedvoisam. Usvarahu lukumi b'mosher kihai. And the svara is that the pasuk, the chiddush that the pasuk is saying yil nadava is referring bedafka to extra karbonos that are all mixed together. Why? The b'shar moshe lo mishkachasla. Because any other type of extra carbon, you won't have a mixture. The mivish mois la'oila v'nitoisru. Let's say you set apart $100 to buy an oila, and you have extra money. Wash a huslu behemoth, because the behemoth doesn't cost $100. The behemoth now only costs $75. So you have an extra $25. So you don't need a pasuk to tell you that extra money of a carbon goes. It must be referring when there's a mixture involved, but it's a mixture that all comes from one place. When you have extra and it's unclear what the extra is, The pashtus is it's referring to one set of karbanos that are mixed together. There, the Torah is telling you, what do you bring it for? L'chol nedreim u'chol nedvoisam. You use it for nedavos, which is kesem mizbech, which are extra carbon oils that I brought whenever there's a slow day, when there's a slow news day. So Zok Gemara, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, Damar Halachahi. According to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the svara for this is a halacha l'moshe Sinai, so the halacha l'moshe Sinai can be very specific. To lahachi says suman in mifaroshem. That's why only if there's a bulk of money and none of the money has been allotted yet to each one of the individual karbanis, there only did the halacha l'moshe Sinai say that such a mixture you bring completely in dova. But mifaroshem. What if I already set up at $500? I said 160 should be for Oila, and 160 should be for Shlomim, and this one, or whatever the remainder should be for the Chatos. So that's not Sasum anymore. That each of the monies were designated. The Halacha l'Moshe Sinai says a mixture where nothing was designated yet. Such a mixture is al nadava. But a mixture where we've already designated which dollar goes for which carbon loy, and that's what the Halacha l'Moshe Sinai might have prescribed. El Rish Lakish, it's just a pasuk of the chol nedreim or chol nedvoisam. It doesn't say exactly how it got mixed together. It just says anytime there's a mixture. So Ibazoi, Meyer, Yisumin, Afilu Mifaroshin. Maybe the pasuk should teach you that even if you've already designated this specific money for this, and this for that, and that's for that, and all that money got mixed together, maybe even there the pasuk is telling you that it should be Yiplu L'Nadava. Amarava Mifaroshin L'Motzasam. It's not an option to consider that once each individual envelope of money was already designated to a specific carbon, there's no way we could have a pasuk teaching us that even that you can all give it to L'Nadav. Why? Because Karpaska Tana Devei B'Shmuel. Tana Devei B'Shmuel already taught us a halacha that Chatas Hameis is Yiplu is Chatas that's moiser because the Bailam died. That money has to go to Yam HaMelech. Why? Because it says in the pasuk Rak Hadashecha Ashiyulacha. And this pasuk is near the pasuk of. It's not near the pasuk. Rashi tells us. The Sifri tells us this is referring to Tamura. So, I take it back. Bevlade kachim u'v'tmuras na kachim v'daber. It's speaking either about a vlad of kachim or about a Tamura of kachim. So, if you have kachim, let's say it's an oila or a shlomim, but we'll see specifically what karbanos it's referring to in a moment. And either they had a child. So it has to be an animal that you could bring in the keva, or you made a tamura on it. That could be by any type of carbon. That the pasuk says rak kadashecha such karbanos as shiyilacha. You have to be makriv. Then what do you do with them? What do you do with these karbanos? Tisa uvasa elamokim ashayivcha Hashem. You have to bring it up to the Beis Hamikdash. What do you do with them at the Beis Hamikdash? Yochol yalim lebeis habchira. The yimnu mehem mayim u'mozo and bishvil shemusu. You might think. So what should you do with such a thing? You should just take it up to the Beis Hamikdash and let it starve to death over there, similar to a chatos hameis. But a chatos hameis, you just leave it wherever it is, and you let it die. Maybe these have the same fate as a chatos, but you have to bring them to the Beis Hamikdash to let them die there. The Torah tells you that you need to bring those karbanos and you need to be makriv them on the mizbeach. So it says in the pasuk, where al mizbach Hashem Elokecha v'dam zivechecha yishavech al mizbech Hashem Elokecha habasar toicha. So the pasuk is saying these karbanos you actually have to be makriv. So you're not going to let them share the same fate as a redundant chatos. Eloy melach to teach you. Kederach shata noig ba'oila noig b'tmurasa. The same thing you do with an oila, which is your makriv on the mizbech. That's what you're going to do with the tamura of an oila. And the oila is normally male. That's why it doesn't normally have a vlad. So that's why we're talking about the tamura oila. And kederach shata noig b'shlomim noig b'liv vladeyim. If you have a carbon shlomim that you made in a dava, you could treat its vlad the same way because a shlomim is a female animal, so it could have a vlad. Zok to Gemara yochel aflat chatos utmuras osham king. You might think that the vlad of a chatos or the tamura of an osham would have those same halacha. Zok to Gemara Talmud Leimer rak. So what does it say in the pasuk? Rak kadashecha shilacha u'nederecha tiso v'asal hamakam asher yivchar Hashem. Rak tells you only some karbonis, your nedavos, such as oilos and shlomim. Those are the only karbonis that you'll bring up and you'll be makriv on the mizbeach. But the chatas and the osham, if it became redundant, the vlad of a chatas will not be brought on the mizbeach. Rather, it's left, or the tumur of a chatas, it's not brought on the mizbeach. Rather, it's left to die. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. That you're makriv, only if they're of the oila or of a shlomim, not of a chatas of a nosh. So that's why the Gemara says earlier, you cannot say that when there's a mishach of karbonis, where we've already identified which money is for the chatas, you cannot say that the pasuk is telling you l'chol nedreim, l'chol nedvoisam, that you bring them as an adava, because we have these lemudim that teach us that a chatas that's redundant is mace. Rabbi Kiva says, I don't need a pasuk of rak. I don't need a pasuk of rak to tell me that a chatas or an osham does not get treated as an adava. Rather, it has to die. And it says in the pasuk oshamu, the osham remains an osham, and you definitely cannot be makbid on the mizbeach and transfer it into an oila if it's no longer needed. Katani, we learned. You might think that nedava such as shlomim and oila that are extra, either the vlad of a shlomim or the tumur of an oila, you would be makbid on the mizbeach. No, sorry. You might think you would bring it up to the base of mikvah, but you will not be makbid. But v'yimna mehem mayim umazon b'shvil shem. So, the pasuk tells you v'asisa oilosecha that you're makbid on the mizbeach. Frag the Gemara, am I? Why would I think that you would bring him up to the base of mikdash and you let him die? That I need a pasuk of v'asisa oilosecha to tell you not like that. Havlat chatas hu digamrinin b'misa. Dafka v'lat chatos, we know that there's misa, but nowhere does the Torah tell you anything about the vlad of a shlomim that should be lemisa. So why would I think that you bring it up to the base of bechira to die? There is no such halacha l'moshe misinai about a redundant animal, a redundant korban being left to die. You only know that by a chatos. So why in the world do I need a pasuk? Zok the Gemara, because he lav kra havamina v'lat chatos b'chol. I would have thought the halacha l'moshe misinai about the v'lat chatos is not something you let it die. You let it die wherever it is. But the v'lat of a shlomim or a tumuras oila, although you cannot let it die wherever it is, because the halacha l'moshe misinai of chatos and mesas isn't going on shlomim, isn't going on oila, but maybe uvla de kachim bebeis bechira. But maybe you still let it die, but you don't let it die the same way wherever it is, but you bring it up to the base of mikdash and you let it die. Kamash malon deloy. That's why we need the psukim of vasisay l'secha basar b'adam to tell you that not only do you bring it up to the base of mikdash, you also have to be makriv as a korban. Katani, we learned. So we're going back to analyze the brisa we just brought down. Yochel af vlat chatas or tumuras asham kain. You might think that the vlat chatas and the tumuras asham also your makriv on the mizbeach, because it says rak, which is the pasuk that we quoted. Rak is rako the shecha shiyulecha u'nederecha tisu v'asal ha'makom ha'shivach Hashem, but not the chatas and not the asham. Frank Gemara lamali kra. Why do I need a pasuk to tell you that a chatos you're not makriv? Do we not have we just spoke about it a second ago. There's halacha l'moshe mishina here. Hilchas ha'gemir law that v'lat chatos l'misa also. So why do I need the pasuk of rak to tell you don't treat a korban chatos this way, wherein I already have a halacha l'moshe mishinai that tells me not to treat a chatos that way? Zaktamar hachanami, you're right. I do not need the pasuk for the chatos. Ukra la'asham hu da'asa. I need it for the asham, because halacha l'moshe mishinai is that the chatos is mesos, but the asham is not mace. The asham is yira. So maybe I need the pasuk to tell you that a rakas kodeshecha dafka oilosh and shlomim, not an asham. There's a halacha l'moshe Sinai that addresses asham as well. And what is the halacha l'moshe Sinai tell us about an asham? Kol she'ilu b'chatos mesa, any condition which would make the chatos have to die. And if you remember, it was the SIMNA, it was v'lat chatos. The chatos gave birth to a child, right? Or temuras chatos, or mesu ba'aleha, which is what we're discussing, or nischaper ba'aleha, or over shnasa, the animal became too old. So any one of these conditions, by a chatas is mace, by an osham it's shroya. The halacha is that by an osham, although you don't let it die, you let it go out to pasture until it gets a mum, and after it gets a mum, then you could sell it and you could buy an oila with the money. Zakt Gemara, if you only had halacha l'moshe Messinai, havamina hilchasa. You're right. The halacha l'moshe tells us that this is what you're supposed to do with it. You're supposed to be let it yirachi yistoy. But the akrive loy lechayev loy klum. But if you were makavit, you're not chayev anything, because there's a halacha that anything we learn from a halacha l'moshe Messinai, you don't get malchus for. You do not get malchus. There's no oinchim for any halacha that we learn from halacha l'moshe Messinai. So if it's only a halacha l'moshe Messinai telling you that you're not supposed to be makar the shasham, I would think, or you're not supposed to be makar the schatos, I would think if you were makar it, you're not over anything. There's an Isra say, it says rak as kodeshecha, only the nedarim and nedavos of oil and shlamim can you bring as an oil, as a shlamim. But you cannot bring a chatos, you cannot bring an osham. Rather, the chatos has to be mesa, and the osham has to be yirachi yistoev, and therefore we have an Isra say not allowed to do it. We would know you're not allowed to do it anyway from the halacha l'moshe Messinai, but the Rak tells you that there's also an Isra say involved. That's also a very big tumult in the Rishonim about a halacha l'moshe Messinai, because according to the Rambam, there's actually two types of halacha l'moshe Messinai. There's a new halacha, and then there's also halacha l'moshe Messinai as a pirush explaining what halacha in the Torah is. And I'm going to give you an example. One of the examples of halacha l'moshe Messinai is priya. Priya is a halacha l'moshe Messinai. Nowadays, that you're mechuyvin priya, it's a halacha l'moshe Messinai. The mitzvah of Mila was given to Avram Avinu. The mitzvah of Mila was told to us at Har Sinai, but not the mitzvah of priya. The mitzvah of priya is halacha l'moshe Messinai. So there's actually a shaila in Shulchan Aruch. If someone makes Mila and he finishes and he didn't make priya, now he has to go back and do the priya. Do you make a bracha on that priya or not? If the whole makar of priya is a halacha l'moshe Messinai, then you wouldn't make a bracha on it. But the shaila is as follows. The shaila of whether or not you make a bracha on it is as follows. What is the halacha l'moshe Messinai telling us that you need priya? Is it a halacha l'moshe Messinai that you need priya? And the ibazai priya is a halacha l'moshe Messinai, you wouldn't make a bracha on it. Or is the halacha l'moshe Messinai that what is entailed, everybody knows with the Rashi you need a bris. How do you define bris? Bris is cutting the arla and doing the priya. So if the halacha l'moshe Messinai is a mefarish, it's explained to us how the mitzvah of Mila works, then avada you'd have to make a bracha on the priya. But if the halacha l'moshe Messinai is a new halacha that you have to do priya, then avada you would not make a bracha on it. It's also relevant by the halacha of Haitzam Rishus L'Shus. That's one of the obvious malachos. What's not mentioned anywhere in the Torah is Maver Dalat Amos Rishus Harabim. If you're in Rishus Harabim, you carry something for Amos, you make a kiran hanacha, you're chayiv misa. The question is, there's a shaila in the Rishonim if it's considered an av malacha, if Maver Dalat Amos Rishus Harabim is considered an av malacha, or if it's a toilda. I don't think there's enough room in halacha because regardless it'll be a chayiv misa, but there's a shaila if it's considered an av malacha or not. What's a tolin? The same shaila. Do you say that the halacha l'moshe Messinai prohibiting being maver dalat amos b'shus harabim is telling you a new halacha that you cannot be maver something dalat amos b'shus harabim, or is it defining a tzom rishus l'shus and it's telling you since a person owns his dalat amos, so to speak, and if you take a chevis out of dalat amos, that's also the taich of a tzom rishus l'shus. So then that would be an av halacha because it's just defining what a tzom rishus l'shus is. And from there, we learn the concept of kinyan dalat amos. So there's several other places where you see an afkamina as to whether or not it was a halacha l'moshe Messinai explaining what it is, or if it's a new halacha l'moshe Messinai. But they're learned from the Torah. They're learned from the Melachos Mishkan. I don't know if there was havaras dalat amos in the Mishkan. It was primarily unloading the wagons from the Rosh Hashanah to the Rosh Hashanah. Okay. Rabbi Kiva says, "Einay tzarich." I don't need the pasuk of Rak to tell you that the chatas and the osham aren't brought on the mizbeach, because Areyu Omer osham hu b'aviyasa yehe. The pasuk already says osham hu, that an osham remains an osham. I'm reading this Gemara not like Toshus, it's a machlek Rishon that we're about to discuss. So osham hu b'aviyasa yehe, there's a pasuk that tells you that the osham remains osham. Fact Gemara lo malikra. Why do I need a pasuk? Gemara Gemirin law. We have a halacha l'Moshe Messinai that kol shebechatas mesa, any one of these 5 conditions that we discussed that are merumas in the SIMNA, any one of these conditions that occur to an asham, but asham roya. But in asham it would be roya achi yistoy. So once again, why do I need ashamu? Zaktamar hachanami. That is correct. The chiasakra lidarav. The reason why we have ashamu is to tell you a chiddush that Rav taught us. The Amar Punu Rav asham shen nitek l're'iyah. You had a carbon asham, and it had one of these 5 conditions. Let's say it's Bailam died. So it's a nitek l're'iyah, meaning it now is put into a different track. It's no longer going to be a carbon asham. We are now going to put it out to pasture. What is that demarcation point where it's considered nitek l're'iyah? That's a big shaila in the Rishonim. But the Mefarish says, if you look at the third to the bottom of the skinny lines, Uba Gizbar v'amar yinotek zelaria. The Gizbar in charge of the Kabbalah says this is now going to go out to pasture. The Rishonim will learn that Bezin has to pass it on it, that it's yinotek l'ria. But whatever it is, there's a line that was crossed where now this animal is no longer destined to be brought on the Mizbech as an Asham, rather it's being sent to Riyah. V'shachtay l'shemoyla. And you shechted it l'shemoyla. So what were you supposed to do? What you were supposed to do is wait until it gets a mum. After it gets its mum, you're going to sell the animal, and then you're going to buy with the money another animal to bring for an oil. What if it was already designated to go into that track, and you took the animal itself and you shechted it l'shem oil? The halacha is it's going to be costly. Time of the nitek, that's dafke if you've already designated it l're'iyah. Haloi nitek loi. The amar kra hulu b'aviyasa yehi. Because the pasuk says asham hu. So what you learn from asham hu is that if it was not yet nitek l're'iyah, if it was not yet nitek l're'iyah, it still has a din of a carbon asham. So I read this Gemara like the Rishonim who argue on Tosis and hold that you need midaraisa in order for the asham to change tracks to the track of oila, to the track of nedava. You need that it should be designated l're'iyah. Tosis actually has a different girsa. Tosis learns kol shebechatas mesa ba'asham oila. Tosis learns that the Gzeres HaKosov is, or the halacha l'Moshe Messinai is, that once it's let's say mesu by Allah, once it has one of those 5 conditions, you automatically bring it for a carbon oil. Why do you need this detake thing? Zog Toisvis, it's all a derabbanan. He brings a raya from other mesechtes that it's only a derabbanan if we say that an asham that has one of these conditions, you just bring it as an oila, we would be concerned that someone could take the carbon asham even before one of these conditions occurred and bring it for an oila. And that would be a real problem because you're bringing an actual asham for an oila. So the Chachamim made a gzeira that you need to send it to Re'iyah and only buy an oila with the money that you'll get from this. So this way a person won't ever think of possibly bringing this animal itself as an oila. Even though technically Halacha Moshe Mashinai says that the moment it's mesu by Allah, if it's an asham, you could be makrabit on the mizbech as an oila, even though that's the ikra din. Since we're afraid someone might do that even before the bailam died, and that's not allowed, we try to create a barrier. And the way we create a barrier is we say never be makrab this animal that was designated to be an asham, never bring it as an oila, only wait till it gets a mum and then buy with it another animal. So because of that, Dr. Funa, what if it was nitik l'riyah, but you didn't yet sell it? It would still work as an asham. I'm sorry, it would still work as an oila. So you were already determined that this is going to go to Re'iyah, and then you will mark it as an oila, it will work. Because really, Me'ikar din, it works even without Nitik L'Re'iyah. The whole thing is only a Gzeira. And he learns, Hu Bav Yosy Yehei is going on the oila. Hu Bav Yosy Yehei, that it becomes an oila. Why is it? Why, if it was Nitik L'Re'iyah, why is it that you're allowed to be makabed as an oila right away? Me'ikar din is because the pasuk says Hu Bav Yosy Yehei, that it automatically becomes an oila the moment its Bailam dies. So that's how Tosfos learns prat in this Gemara. I'm sorry. It says Ashabu, but who is I hear what you're asking, but that's how Tosfos learns it, and I'll actually show you in the Gemara, in the Tosfos how he reads it. I'm on the. Let's go to the second wide line of the Tosfos. Like it says, my timer ulidei hachi perushai, my timer boya kriya shetzarich shishchetenu l'shem oila beferish. Well, right, so he says, Rav Huna says, is when you shecht it, you have to shecht it l'shem oila. You have to have a special kavana that you're shechting it l'shem oila. Amekra, right, he learns it doesn't have to be nitik l'riyah. What it means is you have to have kavana specifically the shecht it l'shem oila. Amekra hu b'aviyasi yehei havayis asham achi yakrenu b'ferish l'shem oila. That's what he means. No, I'm sorry. That's only one trap. The last trap that I was referring to is my time loy by akira hayol v'shem asham alav. The imisham hilchat and issues the karbayla emedafka the akira umashani the amakra hu b'aviyasa yehei sheyehei la'acha kapara oimid la'oila afal fnei akira kemoish asad liyois kishayistoy hanu oila yiyah b'loisham akira. So there's actually another machlokes if you have to specifically designate this animal l'shem chatos. L'shem shlomim. L'shem oila. I keep getting mixed up. You have this animal originally in Oshim. Now you're being makbid as an oila. Can you just be makbid if you have to have specific kavanah to change it? So according to Shita, that you don't even need specific kavanah to change it. You learn that out from Oshim hu bav yosei hey oila. It says Oshim hu. I don't know, but that's how Tosfos is learning these words.
So the word nitik means detached.
I think it means detached. Right. It's detached from Osham to Oila. Oh, so I hear it. So maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so just it was a little bit confusing what we learned today. What we learned today is you have a gemishach of karbonis. How do you know that you could bring it as an Oila? Either chatos in here. The teretz is either we have halacha l'mashmasinai, which is according to Rabbi Yochanan, that tells us only when each dollar wasn't designated. Rather, it was all one big pot. There we have a halacha l'moshe Sinai that if you can all bring a carbon oila with it, or you have a shlok which you learn from a pasuk, and the pasuk only tells you this halacha when nothing was designated, because if something was designated, it's already covered by the rules of chatois hamesois, which is always goes l'misa, and we would never be able to. You would never be able to be makribit as an oila. So that's a sugya we learned. We also learned as an aside a little bit about why when you have an oila v'yored, you have to bring an oila as well as the chatos. That's to give the mizbeach something, to give it hek halav meimurim, and that's what the Meshech Chochmah says. You need a special pasuk for the oila of a oila v'yored that it cannot be brought at night, and that's because the whole purpose of that oila is only to allow for hek halav meimurim. Okay, we'll stop here, Bez Hashem, and we will mamshech on Shabbos and on Motzei Shabbos.